that was Achla Likim de Minafshi, one of the oldest Chabad Nigunim from the Alter Rebbe. And it's from the very first Nicoach record, published in 1960, produced by Benedict Stambler of Collectors Guild, and conducted and arranged by Velvel Pasternak Memorial. And what you'll hear now is about the first 50 minutes of a conversation that I had with Velvel here in Crown Heights at Chevra Ahavas Yisroel 3 years ago. And I'd first like to read to you something from Velvel's book, Beyond Hava Nagila, in which he shares many of the stories that you'll hear now, but lots of other things about his life and his life's work. He writes as follows in his book about that record, the first Nicoach record. A major problem could not be resolved. When the Chassidim sang, the pitch began to rise, a quarter tone, a half tone, and finally a full tone. In music, this is quite a distance. Because they were untrained singers, I assumed that they were not hearing the instrumentalists who were positioned in front of them. The solution, I thought, would be to take the musicians playing portable instruments and place them close to the Chassidim. For a few moments, the singing was steady, but soon it again began to rise. No matter how many times we tried, the results were the same. I finally came to the realization that although the Chassidim were directing their songs for me, their conductor, they were really directing their songs to God in heaven on high. As they strove to get the melody heavenward, the pitch kept rising. As some of you know, Velvel passed away this past Tuesday, June 11th, at the age of 85. I first learned about Velvel's health condition a few months ago after coming across a blog post by his daughter, Shira, who lives in Israel. And in that article, she shares a story that is also from Velvel's book, Beyond Hava Nagila, with regards to being a consultant for the movie The Frisco Kid. And she writes there that when she thinks about her father's great accomplishments, she first and foremost, though, thinks of her father's storytelling and his ability to really communicate messages through story. And he really was a master storyteller. So here are some of those stories. I hope you enjoy them. I'll post the link to the full event in the description, as well as some other articles and videos of Velvel. I hope you enjoy them, and look forward to talking to you soon.
I was raised in Toronto, Canada. At the time I was raised in an Orthodox home, pianos were treif. I kid you not. Why were pianos treif? Because if you succeeded in becoming a good pianist, you might end up playing on Shabbos. So therefore, pianos were treif. But that wasn't so odd, because my father, who came from Eastern Europe, thought that tomatoes were treif. Why would he think tomatoes are treif? Because the only place he saw tomatoes was in the window of the Goyish restaurants. I'm asking you, if it's in the Goyish restaurant, how can it be kosher? So he didn't eat tomatoes. So this is the kind of thing that went on, and for some reason, every time I got near a piano, I tinkled. And at the age of 13, my parents bought a piano. They became very progressive. And I got a teacher for $1 an hour who made me, I was playing already with two hands, and she wanted to teach me how to play scales. And I said to myself, for $1, I'm going to waste my time. So I gave it up. And I kept playing by ear. I went to Yeshiva University and was on my way to rabbinical school. And I felt that I would rather do homiletics through music rather than through droshes, through sermons. I was lucky because in the mountains at that time there was a great hotel called Shlomi Ehrenreich. It's going back many years ago. And the fellows from YU during Pesach used to serve as busboys in the mountains. And one day during their break, they saw a fellow being kicked out of a bar in South Fallsburg, and they picked him up, and in his drunken stupor, they found out that he was a double PhD in music and psychology. They brought him back to New York after Pesach, being nice Jewish boys, and they got him an apartment in the Bronx, and within a year he was teaching about 70 cantors, vocal, and I heard about him. His name was Dr. Charles Gay, and I said, teach me some rudiments of music. He said, I'll make a deal with me. No charge, but I had to sit with him in the bars in the Bronx after every lesson and watch him drink Canadian Club and wash it down with milk because he had an ulcer. And so it was for 2 years that I worked with this double PhD drunk. And he boned me up for the entrance to the Literature as a Materials of Music in Juilliard. And I went there, got a little tired of it after 6 months because all we were doing were masses and Missa Solemnis, etc., etc. And so I went to Columbia and I took a master's in music. And when I got out, they told me that I had to work in the Jewish schools, that I shouldn't be in the public schools. So I began teaching in a place called Brandeis in the Five Towns. Very, very, a very, very fancy school. It was one of the first day schools in the country. Very, very interesting kind of schedule. 2 periods. I taught music, and then I was off for an hour and a half. Then I taught for another hour. I was off for an hour and a half. So I figured the first couple of months, I had a cot in the room, so I slept in between. Then I said, this is absolutely ridiculous. So I began to notate music because my teacher told me, I said, how do you write the notes? He said, do it and you'll find out. All right, so I did it and I found out. I began to notate the music. And in 1967, I had a call from Sheboygan, Wisconsin, a Rebbitzin. And she said, are you Mr. Pasternak? And I said, yes. She said, we have a problem in Sheboygan. I said, what is your problem in Sheboygan? She says, my daughter is marrying a boy from Chofetz Chaim Yeshiva in New York. And they're going to bring about 60 boys from Chofetz Chaim. She said, so we went to the closest band leader to Sheboygan, which is in Chicago, and we said, do you know any Jewish music? And he said, absolutely. I said, what do you know? And he said, we know Hava Nagila. She said, what are my 60 boys going to dance to? So she put her daughter on the telephone. Her daughter is very, very well-known sociologist in Brandeis University. Her name is Sylvia Barak Fishman, very well-known. She's written on all kinds of women's topics and Orthodox. She got on the phone, she said, Mr. Pasternak, you have to do a mitzvah. I said, what kind of mitzvah? You have to get me a book of the kind of music that we're going to use. I said, there is no book. She said, how much do you charge for writing out melodies? I said, I don't charge. Tell me what you want. I'll tell you how much time I took. And whatever you want, you'll send me. She gave me a list of 25 of the well-known Yeshiva Nigunim at the time. And I wrote them out in pencil and put a couple of chords on top. So for accompaniment, I sent them off to her. Told her it took me an hour and a half or 2 hours. 2 weeks later, I got back such a marvelous letter with brachas that we made the wedding. The guys danced and everything was fine and wonderful. And she sent me a check for $25, which at the time in 1967 was really adequate. 6 weeks later, I got a call from Tampa, Florida, a Mrs. Goldenberg. She said, you know, we was in Sheboygan and we have the same problem. I didn't know what she was talking about. I said, excuse me. She said, we were at this wedding, you know, and they used this wonderful music. She said, can you send me a copy? I'll pay you. I said, I didn't keep a copy. So she said, you have to do a mitzvah. I was busy doing mitzvah. I took the same 25 melodies and I wrote them out again. This time I kept myself a copy. And within the period of 5 months, I was sending out notated music to band leaders in San Diego and in San Francisco and in Boston and in Atlanta. Everybody was a mechutin to this music. So I said to myself, they probably need it out there. So I sat down and I took all of the material that I had recorded from Lubavitch and from Mojitz and from Bobover and from Ger. I sat for about a year and I cleaned everything up and I put together a book of music called Songs of the Chassidim. And now I take the manuscript to Metro Music, the big music distributor for 20 years. This is in the from 1940 on. He was the big man, and he looked at the book and he said to me at the manuscript, he said, "You can't sell 10 copies of this." Okay, I mean, so they told me to go to the non-Jewish publishers. So I went to Silver Burdette. And the guy looked at it, didn't understand a word of it, but he said, how many hundreds do you think you can sell in the first printing? One guy tells me I can't sell 10, and the other wants to know how many hundreds I can sell. So I got very, very frustrated, developed a spastic colon, honestly, and decided to look around how you can get this published, because nobody, you know. So somebody said, the cantors probably know you from the recordings. I did the series of recordings of Mojitz and Bobover and Lubavitch. Why didn't you send out a letter? First I have to tell you, I went through the route of Dr. Norman Lamb, may he live and be well. I was teaching in Manhattan Day School, said to me at the time, you know, we're going to give you a man who runs the music library, the Michael's Library, in New York and in Jerusalem, and okay, and you'll write a letter and we'll send it to him and you'll get some money to put out the publication. I was teaching Manhattan Day School. My wife was pregnant with our son, and one day I get a call in a classroom that there's a doctor on the telephone. So I ran out. I figured either my wife's water broke or God knows what's happening. And I get to the telephone, and then some man says to me, Dr. Goldschmidt here. I said, yes. What's wrong with my wife? He said, no. I'm calling about the letter you sent to Mr. Michaels. I am his secretary. He said, Mr. Michaels wants to know if you have music of Bobover. I said, yes. And music of Mojitz? I said, yes. And music of Vishnitz? I said, yes. I answered yes to all of them. He said, that's wonderful. Mr. Michaels would like 3 copies of the manuscript. One for the Jerusalem library, one for his personal library, one for the New York library. I said, if Mr. Michaels knows that I'm looking to publish the book, I can't give out I'm looking for funding. I cannot. Mr. Michaels is not interested in the financial aspects. He only wants the manuscripts. Thank you. I hung up the telephone. I said, unbelievable. Rich men want the manuscript, but not a penny. 2 weeks later, I get a call again. Dr. Goldschmidt here. Mr. Michaels has an idea for you. If you will publish the book in Israel, it will be much cheaper. Thank you. Okay? So I've sat for a year that everybody wants this music all over, and here I am. So somebody said to me, go after the cantors in America. They know your name from the recording. So I wrote a note. I started writing a letter. I am delighted to announce, or I'm pleased to. And I showed it to some advertising man. He says, you know what people do with a letter that says, I'm happy to announce, or I'm delighted to let you know? They throw it in the garbage. So I said, kind Father, give me an opening line. And he gave me a line, for which I'm grateful. And he said, have you ever heard a Hasidic nigun and hoped somebody would write it down? Question mark. Well, we have just done that. Boom. And I sent it out, and within it was for $7.50 for the book, including postage. Right? In 1968. Within 2 weeks, I had 300 postcards come in with checks. I mean, letters with checks. I knew that if a cantor gets a $7.50 offer on Monday, he expects the book to be there on Thursday. So I quickly made a postcard and I sent it out to all of them saying, the book will be ready in 3 weeks. It's at the printer now. In 3 weeks, I sent it out. And that started it. And then I went around to the conventions of cantors and of rabbis with a little book, with a little slip off of this book. And that started the, Baruch Hashem, it turned out to be 12 books of Hasidic music. I sort of gave up on being current when the rabbi's sons came in with the new progressive Jewish music. And at that time, I went into the broader aspect of Jewish music. So it was klezmer, it was choral, it was Yiddish, it was Ladino, etc., etc. So that's the genesis of Tara Publications. Now, Baruch Hashem, I think 140 books spanning the. I have not kept up with the. I just reprinted. I told your chairman here. I just reprinted the Karlbach anthology, which I did for him, which has been out of print for 15 years. And I put out now a Siddur anthology of all of the famous nigunim of the yeshiva world of the 20th century, to keep them alive. We hear some of them at the weddings, but they're being forgotten because they're being transplanted by all of the new nigunim.
Yeah, and you've gone digital now.
We're totally digital. I saw the writing on the wall 2 years ago, and I took all of the books, everything, and all the recordings are in MP3s, and that's it.
Okay.
Okay.
I'm wondering if we can go back to your childhood in Toronto. Could you tell me a little bit about the influence that Muzhitz had?
The Muzhitzer Rebbe would come to Toronto, Rabbi Saul Taub, who was the composer, really the outstanding composer of Muzhitz, just in the terms of how much he composed, would come to Toronto for 2 weeks every year. And my father, who had davened in the Muzhitzer Shtibel in the town of Khmelnyk, or Tvotsk, Khmelnyk, would take me there. My father had a wonderful ear for music, not a good voice, but a tremendous. He'd hear a nigun once, and he would schlep me with him as a kid, as a 7-year-old, as an 8-year-old, and I would go every year. And those nigunim I learned from my father and from the Rebbe. They became the nigunim that they sang in all of the shtivlach in Toronto. When I came to New York, to YU, the Ben Zion Schenker of Muzhitz was busy making the second recording of the 3 festivals of the Shalosh Regalim, and I joined them as a music student. I joined them and took care of the baritone section and kept the Chassidim on pitch.
Okay, so that was the first Majlis recording that you worked on.
That was the first that I worked on, yes.
And then you worked on several others.
Well, I worked on we broadened the Malava Malka record, which Benzi and Schenker had done, from a 10-inch LP into a 33 RPM, and we added some material. And then I did a recording with Benzi and Schenker called Lubavitch Shabbos, and then I did the two Mojitzer recordings, Mojitzer Favorites #1 and #2, which I did with a wonderful musician called Vladimir Chaifetz, a cousin of Yasha Chaifetz, a fellow who came from Russia, and I'll tell you an interesting story about him because I think it's pertinent to this group here. He was a very secular Jew, and he got involved. He was a Russian musician, and he got involved with the workman's circle, and then somebody took him for a shul choir, and he became a very cultural Jew. And we approached him to do the background music for these recordings. And we did the Lubavitch Shabbos with him, and we did the Mojitzer Favorites #1 and #2. And at one point he said to me, I always hear this music secondhand from you. Because I would give him a notation and a choral arrangement, and he did the background with, we used people from Radio City, et cetera, We did recordings that at the time cost $60 an hour, which was unbelievable. And he said, I always hear it I would like to hear it in the raw, really. I said, you know what, Simchas Torah is coming, and it would be very, very nice. I'll give you a couple of addresses, and you can go and hear this music in the raw. So I gave him an address on Bedford Avenue of Satmar, and I gave him 770 of Eastern Parkway. And I met him right after Yom Tif. And I said, Nu Volodya, how did it go? He said, very interesting. I said, what's interesting? He came into Satmar, dressed in a light gray suit, with a white yarmulke, right? And he stood in the back. Absolutely nobody paid attention to him. No one. Suddenly you heard a niggun that really felt good. So every musician carries with him staff paper, 5 lines, so you can write music. He took out the paper and took his pencil and began to write. He said, crazy people. They picked him up by the elbows and put him out in the middle of Bedford Avenue. So he didn't know what happened to him, but there was a cab passing by. He had the address of 770. So he took the address and he told the cab driver to take me to Eastern Parkway. He came in, he stood in the back there in his light gray suit with the white kippah, and nobody paid attention to him. When he heard a good niggun, it was later at night, he took out his staff paper again, began to write. And he wrote, and he wrote, and he wrote until the niggun was finished. And when he put the piece of paper back in his pocket, somebody came over and said, Shalom Aleichem. Who are you? Right? Told them who they were. They took him up front, right? To the dais, right? Such wonderful people, 2 nights later, they were teaching him Tanya on 28th Street. Yeah. Forever after that. Here was the difference, Satmar put him out with his elbows, and this one. But he is the one that he wanted to get a feeling, and he did get it from the Lubavitch Chassidim. He got it from the Satmar also, but at least he...
Okay, yeah. So speaking of Chabad, so how did the production of the first record of Nicoach come about? Who approached you?
Oh, it was really see, we were living here on Union Street in Crown Heights, and I was approached by Benedict Stambler, who ran a company called Collectors Guild. He was a Sephardi Jew who was into Jewish music, and he was the first one to put out the reissues of cantorials and the yeshiva stuff. He was a phenomenal guy, and he he got in touch with Chabad, and I was asked to do a job with the Chabad, singers, and they gave me a musical mentor and director whose name Rabbi Shmuel Zalmanov of blessed memory. Very interesting man. He came up to my apartment. We had an apartment on Union Street, as I said, and it was a one-bedroom apartment. The living room had one piece of furniture in it, a piano, a Baldwin Acrosonic piano that, at the time was, and he looked at the piano and he said, the piano is missing some schmitchikits. I didn't know yet that I was in trouble, but so he brought up 16 of the best singers of Lubavitch. Came in, it was the time of the Castro period. 16 guys with scrubbly beards came up on Union Street. I think my neighbors were freaked out. They sat down. They handed me a Sefer HaNigunim, the Bible of Nagina for Lubavitch, and I began to play, and these guys began to sing. And I could have been in Oshkosh, and they could have been in Bibelik, because what I was playing and what they were singing were... So he said to me, "You're not playing correctly." Okay. Broad shoulders. I tried again. I said, "I am reading what is written." It took me a little while to understand what the story was with this. They had selected cantor Yeshua Weiser, who was one of the famous cantors here in Brooklyn, and they gave him 6 or 8 of the famous Lubavitch singers, or the Bobover Chassidim, and they closeted themselves in 770, and he said to them, "You sing and I'll write, I'll notate." And the 6 or 8 guys could not come to the exact same version. So he said to himself, "They can't read music anyway." I'll prove it to you. Because 10,000 of those books were sold by Lubavitch and were in every shrunk in Lubavitch world, and not one person knew that they weren't written correctly. Okay? He wrote it, not correctly, he wrote it the way he thought they meant it to be sung. So here I am playing from the music that he notated, and there, every 2 minutes somebody would say, "Nicht azay." No, not like that. Not like that. So finally, what I did was that I had them sing for me, or get Zalmanov to sing for me the correct version, and I changed the music and I wrote it out, okay? Now we get to the problem of doing a job, of doing a recording. So I say to them very, very simply, you have to begin together and end together for recording. And they looked at me like I was absolutely mad. What do you mean? We always begin together and end together. What they thought was that they were going to be at a Fabreng, where the Rebbe did this when he wanted them to start a nigun, and he did this when he wanted to stop. And here this young whippersnapper is saying that he should start together and end together. So I tried to convince them that at the Farbrengen was quite different, but this was going to be listened to by people, and you expect that you begin and end together, not... We got over that hump after a while, okay? Now we go on for 4 months, we rehearsed, get them to sing together. Sing a little bit with Masikas, with a little bit with, not the Farbrengen, with the passionate kind of singing. I wanted them to sing, to have a harmony, so it would build up the rawness of the... They couldn't do it. They couldn't concentrate on anything except the melodic line. So I hired 3 ringers, 3 guys, professional singers, to do baritones, to do the I remember one of them was coming by, and the group happened to have been outside. One day we were rehearsing someplace on, I don't know, President Street, and the guy was without a kippah. And I said, oh, here comes David Eisen. And they looked at me and they said, no kippah? I ran out to him and I said, listen, if they ask if you're wearing tzitzis, make sure you say yes, because otherwise we're finished. Anyway, the three ringers, it began to work. 6 months, 4 months rather, in rehearsal. And then I said to them, it's time to think of doing the recording. So they said to me on a couple of conditions. What are the conditions? Number one, they said that we have to have a Malava Malka first on a Saturday night in somebody's home. And I said, why? And they said, because we're going to have a fabring in order to start this project. I said, okay. What is the second condition? It has to be on a Monday night or a Tuesday afternoon. I said, why? They said, we're only going to record on the night of Tuesday, on Tuesday. Why? If you know Bereshit, Genesis, Vayar Elokim Ki Tov, and God saw that it was good. It says it twice. So therefore, Tuesday is a day of Mazel. And you guys know that Chabad, Nicoach, and all kind of Chassidim will move from one apartment to another on a Tuesday. We'll open a business on a Tuesday. We'll announce a shidduch on a Tuesday. Because it is a good day. I said, okay, and what's the other condition? They said, no, that'll be okay. All right. So we get there on a Saturday night, and the Lubavitch had their fabring, and they had nahit, chickpeas, and beer, and all kinds of rogalach, It was fine. And each one decided he was going to sing solo for me. God help us. If I had known beforehand, I never would have done the job, because as a group I could sort of mold them into, but singing, some of them. I had one guy, Talashevsky, Chazan Talashevsky.
What did you call him?
We called him Tall Chief, because it was a lot easier. Just like the engineer would call them Lubos. He couldn't get by Lubavitch, but they were forever the Lubos. Okay, we hired a studio in rock and roll territory, 1961, 58 and 8th Avenue. And
So what did you observe at the Malava Malka about their singing style?
Of a singing style?
Yeah.
They were singing, it was absolutely terrible for a recording. It was raw. By themselves, they were raw. But in the group, we were able to. By the way, I still can't listen to that recording, but the London Jewish Chronicle called it the perfect ethnic music recording of Hasidic music ever made. And
I think I remember you noticed at that Malava Malka that the singing wasn't for the air; it was for themselves.
It was for themselves, yeah. But now I'm going to get them. I've worked with them as a group together. One would bolster the other. It was okay.
All right, so tell us about radio.
Rock and roll's territory. I mean, I've told this story 1,000 times, but it's especially good in a Chabad venue. Every doorway had a guy with a guitar with long hair. So I have these 16 guys from Lubavitch coming to record the music that the Rebbe asked them to record, together with Rabbi Zalmanov. And it's on 8th Avenue and 58th Street, the studio upstairs. And I have an engineer who's not Jewish, very, very well known at the time. He did all the Jewish recordings, called David Hancock. And we had Mrs. Stambler, the producer's wife, in the technical room, getting ready. We showed up. I told him to be there at 7:30 sharp, right? Okay, at 7:15, he said to me, "Where are the Lubos?" I hung out the window looking and saw nothing. 25 after 7, I looked out again. A big caravan coming up the street. Beards all over the place, So I thought to myself that I recognized one in the front, that the Lubavitcher guys had, they met up with another group of Chassidim, and that my 16 guys would come up to the studio, and the rest of the group would go on their way. I was wrong. When the elevator finished disgorging itself for the 4th time, I found that I was in a room with at least 40 people, my group, Chassidim, together with women and and older Chassidim and Rabbi Zalmanov, and I said to them, "Excuse me, who are all these people?" He said to me, and I've learned to watch out for these 2 words ever since that night. He said to me, "Don't worry." Don't worry, okay. And they're carrying, all of a sudden I noticed that there were crates. And I opened up the crates, and there were apples and oranges and all. And then 2 guys had brown bags under their arm, and I watched them, and they took out, at the time, 4 bottles of what we officially known in Hasidic life as Sechsundneunziger. You know what Sechsundneunziger is? If you want to drink Drano and survive, you drink that stuff. All of a sudden, I became a sugar, and I said to them, exactly what is going to happen here? And they said, we are doing an avoda for the Lubavitcher Rebbe. We are not, straight singers. We can't sing just for microphones. So I said, what's going to happen? They said, we're going to have a shtickle farbring. Not a whole farbring, but a shtickle farbring. And what they did was they passed out all of the fruit and everything, and the cake, whatever they had there, and the guys drank l'chaim to each other, and they hung up a picture of the Rebbe. They brought with them right, and everybody drank l'chaim to the Rebbe. And I'm standing there, and the non-Jewish engineer, David Hancock, says, we should call Variety because nobody would ever believe this. Okay, so here we are, we have the farbring. I said to Rabbi Zalmanov, it's funny, 40 years after, I said to Rabbi Zalmanov, how long will this farbring take? And if you ask a Chabadsky a good question, he gives you a very good answer. He said, Rabbi Pasternak, by the way, they gave me smicha that night, which I can't give back. They said, he said to me, Rabbi Pasternak, I want you to know, this farbring will take exactly as long as it takes, not 1 minute longer. Okay. So now they're finishing their yash, and I sit back. Finally, when they were finished, they took the women, they put them in the back, and the kids in the back, and the older people in the back, and the guys stood around the microphone. They took off their jackets, they flexed their tzitzis, and now they said, quote, we are ready to do the bidding of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. God forbid the conductor, but the Lubavitcher Rebbe. At this point, we're ready to start, and Rabbi Zalmanov says to me, Rabbi Pasternak, he said, please don't conduct. I said to him, excuse me? What do you mean? He said, don't conduct. He thought I didn't understand. He said, don't make with the hands. I said, Rabbi Zalmanov, what do you mean don't make with the hands? He says, no, sit down, you get paid anyway. Yeah, it's funny. You should stand there in front of a group of musicians and a group. I said to him, Rabbi, what are you talking about? I've been training this group for 4 months now, whatever it is. What is the problem? He said that if you conduct and they watch your hands, it will get in the way of their kavana, of their concentration. I said, Rabbi, how can you do this to me? I mean, I'm the conductor of this group. I spent 4 months rewriting the music. He said, I see you're a difficult man. So I will tell you the truth. And this is what it said. You can conduct, but nobody will watch you. Right? It's out in the open. I mean, 4 months, they won't. So I had trained him, I think, well enough that when the music began to play, nobody's watching me. We're going along and we're singing, and things are falling into place. We're about to do Uforatsta, And our studio, it was a very interesting situation that God in His infinite wisdom creates shidduchim on the ground. There was an inner studio, if you can imagine, over there. And the bathrooms you have to go down to the bathroom. And in that group was rehearsing a group of ballet Americana girls who, when they rehearse in skin-tight leotards. And I can paint you the picture exactly as it happened. One of the young ladies had to use the facilities, and she saw that the green light in the studio, which means you can walk in or some action can take place. And when the red light is on, everything drops dead, only the music. But the green light is on, you come in. Had to use the facilities, and so she gingerly walked in to the studio to get to the bathroom. And all of a sudden, I hear from the studio, from the inside, Hancock says, "Where are they?" And I looked up, 16 guys, not a trace, they're out. So I'm not saying this to be critical, because I'm saying I make a point with this nice story, because to them it meant something totally different than it meant to me at the time. And I said to them, I went out into the hallway, didn't see them, so I took the elevator down the street, and 16 guys on the street. I said to them, "What are you doing here? We're in the middle of recording." They said, "You didn't see what happened?" I said, "What happened?" They said, "A half-nude girl walked into the room while we're singing Ufaratsto." I thought the blood was going to burst in my head. My pressure must have gone up. And I said to them, the only two brilliant things, my wife will agree, only two brilliant things I ever said in my life was there on 58th Street. I said to them, the age of miracles will never cease. I said, I, who had my eyes open, did not see them. You had your eyes closed. You saw that girl walk in? They said to me, no jokes. I said, it's not a joke. I said, what is the problem? They said, you're treating this as a recording, and we are treating it as an avoda. If we were davening in shul, and a young lady with leotards walked in the middle of davening, we would leave. No difference. I said, so what do you want me to do? It's embarrassing. We will not go up until you change the studio. I said, I should change the studio? We will not go up until you change the studio. I said, how am I supposed to do it? They said, you'll find a way. So I went upstairs and I saw the manager, and I said to him, you won't believe this, but I'm having a rebellion on my... He said, what's the problem? I said, you know who these guys are that are next door? You saw them, yeah. He said, who are they? I said, they're a group of Amish from Lancaster, Pennsylvania. Oh, I'm going to tell him that they're Chabadniks, He'll say to me, sugar, do me a favor. So I convinced him that they had to go on with their, what do you call it? And I also took in with me a half a bottle of the Zex Neinsker that was left. And I gave it to him. And the girls went into a different studio. Only then could we go back and record. Okay? Now, I'm trying to tell you that as funny as the story is, in Yiddish there's an expression, malach mit yashlikis, that you're laughing on the inside and crying on the outside, whatever it is. And at the time, it was not funny. it's humorous now, but the ikr is that they were doing a davening. They weren't doing a recording for no matter who it was. And they were right. They weren't going to be bothered by my hands. Nothing could get in the way except the... So that was my experience with Chabad. It was the first really Hasidic recording that I did, because the other recordings that we did were done with conservative cantors.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the conservative cantors, could you tell us a little bit about your experience with the Bobover recordings?
You read my book, that's why.
Yeah.
Bobover recording, I was asked, one of the songs you're going, it was a result of one of the songs you're going to sing later on called B'ni. I was called in, the Bobover Rebbe, Reb Shlomo, who used to live on St. Mark's Avenue, just a couple of blocks away. And I was called in by him and by this Ben Stambler, the producer, and he said to me at the time that his own son had come home from yeshiva, day school where yeshiva, and he had said he had learned a beautiful melody called B'ni, B'ni, which he'll sing later. And he said, the Bobover Rebbe said, you don't know that your grandfather wrote this melody? He said, no. He said, if my own son doesn't know what his grandfather wrote, how would I expect my Chassidim to know the music of Bobover? Therefore, he said, it has to be permanently recorded. And he asked me, through the producer, to do the, it was 16 pieces of the Bobover repertoire. Okay, I began to write this. The Bobover is a Galiciana group. They daven differently. They don't say Baruch Atah, they say Baruch Atah, right? So now I have to, I'm writing out the music in the Lithuanian pronunciation, Baruch Atah, and my Hasidic mentor, Rabbi Halberstam, who was a cousin of the Rebbe, said to me, it won't work. I said, what do you mean it won't work? He says, this has to be done in the original Oishprach, original way. I said, what do you mean? He said, Buya, Chatu, what? I said, you must be kidding me. I mean, this is going to be for recording. Who wants to hear that now? The world is trained, in the Misnagdic way that you say, Baruch, Chatu. He said to me, I had learned it before, but he said to me, don't worry, do it. So now I took all of the music and I retransliterated for my singers, and I wrote, Booyach, B-O-O-R, Yech, Y-E-C-H, Atu, A-T-O-O, Elokaini, E-L-O-K-A-I-N-E. I didn't know if I should put another couple of E's on it. And I looked at it and I said, this is never going to work. And he said to me, don't worry. Now at that time I decided, after the Lubavitch experience, that I was going to use guys who could read music and could sing, you know what I mean? And could pretend that they knew the Hasidic music. So I had a group of cantors from Long Island, conservative cantors by the way. There were a couple of Orthodox guys too. Didn't matter who they were, but they all knew Hebrew and they all knew music, and we would get together and one night we would rehearse the whole thing and then we would go to the studio with the musicians. Okay, so I get them the first night, and I remember there was a cantor from Freeport, Long Island, who picked up the music, and he looked at it, and he said very, very quietly, Velvel, in what language are we singing So I said to him, look, the Rabbi Halberstam wants us to do this in the authentic way, as he said, and therefore we will do it in a... Okay, so we start to sing, and we get through, I think the the piece was Siman Tov Mazel Tov, which works out to be Siman Tov Mazel Tov Yehai Luni L'chol Yisroel Umay. Right? So we get to Siman Tov, that's good. Mazel Tov, that's good. Yehai Luni, we get to the word Luni, and the group cracks up. One guy says, "Is this Looney Tunes?" I said to them, we tried again. No good. Try it a third time, and it begins to feed on itself. I can't do it. So I said, Rabbi, it's not me. I wrote it out the way you wanted it. Please. He said to me, don't worry. I take care of it. He walks over, nice broad-brimmed black hat, beautiful capote, beard down to here. He said to him, you and your fancy conductor are very, very sad that this is in the authentic Aussprach. He said, when a chassid can't convince people in the normal way, he tells a story. Wow. Go ahead, be my guest. This is the story he tells, and I'm going to use his accent because it has the flavor of this Jew. I've never heard a better, authentic, ethnic story to bring out a point. He said, a group of Tensers from the Ivory Coast. You know, Tensers, those people who tense. A group of Tensers from the Ivory Coast, and their conductor there came to the minister, the cultural minister of Israel, and said, we would like to have intercultural relations. See, even in English, the A becomes I. Intercultural relations, he said, between our two cultures, and therefore we would like to bring this culture to your nation. The minister from Israel said, that would be wonderful. Oh, the minister from the Ivory Coast said, we must make you aware of a problem we have in the Ivory Coast. So the minister from the Ivory Coast said, what is the problem? He said, you see, our Tensers tense only bare-chested. So the minister from Israel said, bare-chested? What do you mean bare-chested? He said, you know, naked, open, exposed. So the minister from Israel said, really? Open, naked, exposed? You know what they'll do for me in Israel? It said, chief rabbi in Tel Aviv, throw me down from the cliff. They put stones after me. Chief rabbi in Jerusalem, hang me from a light pole. He said, what? You cannot do that. You can't do that. He said, cha. I have it, no problem. Don't worry, no problem. He said, when you come here for Israel, and you come down from the plane, we will be there with shmatis. Shmatis, rags. And we will give you those shmatis to cover it up. So the minister from the Ivory Coast said, if we cover this up, it is no longer the dancers from Ivory Coast, maybe from some other nationality. It's the same thing with you. You are very embarrassed. Our music, our singing is so open, so exposed. It's so, you say, Yehai Luni. He said, you cover this up and you say, Yehai Lanu. It is not the music of Bobover any longer. Maybe from some other Hasidic group. He said, ours has to be. That is the story that this man with this shrubbery and the capote and everything else told us. He was right. He was absolutely right. Because the music of Bobover should be done the way Bobover sings it. The music of Lubavitch should be done the way Lubavitch sings it. So that is the story of Lubavitch and Bobover.
So I hope you enjoy those stories. I remember when I picked up Velvel to come to Crown Heights for this event. I came into his house and we chatted a bit, and his wife was there, and then I saw his wife put her coat on, and then I said, "Oh, you're coming as well?" And she said, "Of course." And then Velvel was like, "I don't go anywhere without my wife." And I found that to be very touching, as I found their conversations between each other from the number of times that I visited them and got to hear how they spoke to each other, and really something special. So I asked him about that, and in his usual wit and humility, you'll hear the response. Their relationship was clearly something special, and I'll include a link to a video in which they share some stories about how they met and their marriage. It's really something special. After that, we'll close it out with a niggin that Velvel makes reference to earlier. That's the Niggin B'ni, the Bobover Niggin from the first of the two Bobover records that Velvel worked on behalf of the Bobover Rebbe, together with Laser Halberstam. You'll hear the niggin in its entirety, and I hope you'll enjoy it, and I'll post a link to it as well in the description. Hope you've enjoyed this, and look forward to bringing you other stories very shortly. Talk to you soon. I noticed just from visiting you a few times that you have a pretty exceptional relationship with your wife. I think that a lot of us here are single or recently married. Can you tell us any tips or how that happened?
Yeah, well, first of all, if you're in an apartment, get yourself a basement where you can hide. I've done all my work in the basement, which is my studio. It's wonderful. If I had a bathroom down there, I'd never see my wife. Secret of success. We always had it. I don't know.
How long have you been married?
58 years. Wow. Yeah. And we're still friends.
Friends. That's what the way you were talking to each other, I said that's probably friends.
Yeah. You haven't heard us when we argue, but in Brandeis I mentioned that on a Friday night they got together. Everybody should introduce themselves. You know, it was a kind of Shabbaton. And I was out there as a scholar in residence for the weekend. And we went around the room. I am Moshe Goldenberg, and then my wife, you know. And suddenly an old man said, "My name is Misha Kalis. I am an artist who came from Russia. And today," he said, "I am very, very happy to be here with you people," he said, "especially since we are celebrating our 60th wedding anniversary." And everybody clapped. And somebody from the back said, "To what do you attribute this longevity?" He said, "We always hold hands." And somebody said, "What does that do?" He said, "I tell you, I don't know, but if we ever let go, we'd kill each other."
Minara